Emily clutched her daughter's tiny hand as they stepped into the towering glass building that seemed to pierce the clouds. She wore her only blazer, slightly worn at the cuffs, and her nerves were stitched into every step. The job interview today wasn't just another chance, it was the only chance. Bills were piling up, her fridge was nearly empty, and finding childcare on short notice had been impossible. So Lily, just 6 years old with her favorite crayon-stained dress and wide eyes, had to come along. The receptionist raised an eyebrow when she saw the child but, sensing Emily's desperation or perhaps just moved by it, buzzed her in. They rode the elevator in silence, Emily rehearsing her pitch, Lily clutching her teddy bear. At the top floor, behind the sleek glass doors, sat James Whitmore, a man who had everything, except warmth. Known for his brilliance and cold demeanor, James hadn't smiled in years. He glanced up from his tablet as the door opened, expecting another generic applicant. But when he saw Emily, and the small child beside her, he frowned. He didn't speak at first. Just studied them. Emily swallowed her fear and introduced herself, apologizing softly for bringing her daughter. Lily stared curiously at the cold, quiet man behind the desk. James had seen millions walk through his doors. None of them had ever brought a child. And certainly none had looked at him the way that little girl did, not with judgment, but with innocent curiosity. The silence in James Whitmore's office felt heavy, almost suffocating. The minimalistic decor, sleek furniture and clean lines, added to the coldness of the space. Emily tried her best to focus on the interview, answering his questions about her qualifications, her experiences, and her ambition. But every time she spoke, she felt her daughter fidgeting on her lap, her tiny fingers clutching at her mom's jacket. Emily couldn't help but worry about Lily's restlessness. She tried to keep her calm, offering her some quiet toys, but the anxiety of the interview weighed on both of them. Halfway through, Lily's small voice broke the tension. "Are you sad, mister?" she asked, looking up at James with innocent curiosity. James blinked, startled by the question. He wasn't used to being asked anything so personal in an interview. "Why would you ask that?" he responded, caught off guard by her boldness. Lily simply replied, "You look like my teddy bear when I leave him alone." The word struck James deeply, more than he expected. A flood of memories rushed through him, memories of his own daughter, the one he had lost years ago. The pain of his grief, which he'd buried in his work, suddenly resurfaced. He quickly waved his hand, dismissing the interview as if it meant nothing anymore. Emily, confused and embarrassed, thought she had ruined her only chance. She stood up to leave, her heart sinking. But before she could exit, Lily stepped forward and wrapped her tiny arms around James. It was a simple hug, one that only a child could offer. James froze at first, unsure of what to do. Then, slowly, he embraced her back, feeling something inside him crack open. Tears welled up in his eyes, though he didn't understand why. That small, innocent hug had unlocked something inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. The office, once cold and distant, now felt different as the golden rays of the setting sun softened the sharp edges of the room. James, still seated but no longer hiding behind his desk, looked at Emily and Lily with a quiet vulnerability. He cleared his throat and asked, almost hesitantly, "Would you mind staying a little longer?" Emily nodded gently, surprised but willing. He began to speak, slowly at first, then with more weight. He told them about his daughter, Mia. She had been just 7 when an illness took her away. In the years since, James had buried his grief beneath layers of work, building an empire while building walls around his heart. No one had gotten close. He had convinced himself he preferred it that way. But Lily's hug, so open, so full of love without reason, had pierced through the silence he had lived in for 5 long years. Emily didn't respond with sympathy or polished words. She didn't try to impress or offer solutions. She simply listened, fully present, heart open. For once, she wasn't an applicant, and he wasn't a CEO. They were two people, sharing pain and humanity in the quiet. Lily, sensing the shift, played quietly with her teddy bear in the corner, humming softly. For the first time in years, the silence in James' office wasn't heavy. It was peaceful, like a storm had passed, leaving calm in its wake. Something had changed. And it was only just beginning. The cafe was warm and inviting, a world away from the sleek, sterile halls of James' office. The smell of fresh coffee and baked pastries filled the air as Emily and Lily slid into a booth by the window. Emily wore a modest dress, her nerves showing in the way she smoothed her hands across her lap. Lily, meanwhile, bounced with excitement, her teddy bear in tow. James arrived shortly after, more casual than she'd ever seen him, no suit, no coldness in his eyes. He smiled, genuinely this time, as he sat down across from them. "I didn't ask you here just for lunch," he said, his tone sincere. "I want to offer you the job. Not out of pity, but because you reminded me what it means to lead with heart." Emily's breath caught in her throat. That alone would have been enough. But then he added something she never could have expected. "I've decided to start an in-house childcare center at the company," James said, glancing at Lily. "And I want you to run it. You understand what these families need better than anyone." Tears welled in Emily's eyes. Her lips trembled, searching for words, but all she could do was nod. Lily, sensing the joy in the room, clapped her hands. "Do I get to bring my teddy?" James chuckled, a warm, full laugh that surprised even him. "Of course you do." In that moment, it felt like the beginning of something bigger, for all of them. The once silent corner of the corporate tower now echoed with laughter, chatter, and the joyful chaos only children can create. Sunlight poured through colorful windows, lighting up walls filled with finger paintings and crayon rainbows. This was the company's new daycare center, warm, alive, and full of heart. At the center of it all was Emily, guiding staff, comforting toddlers, and greeting parents with a calm, confident smile. She had found her purpose, and a home within these walls. Nearby, Lily sat on the floor with markers and paper, her teddy bear beside her as always. She was drawing with intense focus, tongue slightly sticking out the way she did when she was deep in thought. James entered the room, not in a suit, but in jeans and a sweater, greeted by a chorus of tiny voices and high fives. He had changed, not just in appearance, but in soul. He came every day now, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Here, he wasn't a CEO. He was just James. He wandered over to Lily, who held up her newest masterpiece with a proud grin. He took it gently. 3 stick figures smiled back at him. One tall, one with long brown hair, one small with a teddy bear. Underneath, in big, wobbly letters, "My family." James felt something swell in his chest, not pain, but peace. He smiled, deeply and truly. Because sometimes, one small hug can rewrite an entire life.